This is also a time of change for my family. Catherine becomes Queen Consort. In recognition of her own loyal public service, I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely.
The palace did not ask the nation to prepare. It did not soften the language or hide the decision inside ceremonial wording. Instead, a statement arrived with brutal clarity. Catherine would immediately replace Camilla as Queen Consort. Within minutes, doors closed, telephones rang, and every senior royal understood that this was not a temporary adjustment. It was a transfer of identity, authority, and public loyalty at the very heart of the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles read the version alone, lowered the page, and said nothing. The silence carried the weight of a marriage, a reign, and a decision he knew could not be undone. Queen Consort, the title traditionally given to the wife of a reigning king, carries ceremonial influence and public duty, rather than independent constitutional power. Replacing its holder, while the monarch remained on the throne, was therefore more than a change of schedule. It was a break with royal custom, and he understood the cost. Camilla received the news in a sitting room moments later. She gripped the arm of her chair and asked whether the statement had already been released. When an aide confirmed that broadcasters were reading it across the country, she turned away without answering. Her loss was immediate and personal. The role she had fought to secure over decades was being transferred in a single public sentence, and the phrase, "with immediate effect," made one truth impossible to ignore. The palace had prepared this long before she was told. Catherine opened a sealed briefing folder while William stood beside her, watching each line change her future. Inside was a revised ceremonial schedule, a new order of precedence, and instructions directing senior household staff to begin serving her that same day. The order of precedence, the ranking that decides who stands, enters, and is received first at royal events, placed her where Camilla had stood hours earlier. This was not extra responsibility. It was a full transfer of position. William noticed a handwritten note at the bottom of the first page. Charles had written that the decision had become unavoidable after a crisis the palace had concealed for weeks. The future king read the line twice, then looked at his wife as she held the folder without speaking. Catherine's elevation was no reward. It was the answer to something dangerous, something personal, and something still hidden behind closed doors. The announcement had changed Catherine's future in a single sentence. But to understand why the crown chose her, the private fears of every person involved had to be exposed. Behind the titles stood 4 people, facing 4 different forms of loss. Catherine had been elevated before she was emotionally prepared. Camilla had been removed from the role she fought decades to reach. William saw responsibility closing around his family, while Charles faced the painful truth that protecting the monarchy might require publicly wounding the woman who had remained beside him through years of hostility. Catherine held the sealed folder but could not bring herself to open it again. As Princess of Wales, the title held by the wife of the heir to the throne, she had always known that greater duty waited ahead. But Queen Consort was different. It meant standing beside the reigning king during state occasions and representing the crown at its highest ceremonial level. That boundary had once seemed years away. Now it had been crossed in a single morning, without warning and without celebration. William watched her struggle and chose his words carefully. She finally told him that accepting the role felt like entering a room while another woman's chair was still warm. The future king understood the danger behind that fear. If she appeared eager, the public might mistake duty for ambition. Yet if she refused, the palace crisis could deepen, leaving Charles exposed, and the monarchy divided when stability mattered most. Camilla sat alone until the king entered without advisors, secretaries, or prepared notes. She asked whether he had ever intended to defend her. Charles opened his mouth, then hesitated. That silence wounded her more deeply than any official statement could have done. She had survived years of public anger, cruel headlines, and resistance inside royal circles, because she believed his loyalty would remain when everything else failed. Now the role she had fought to reach was gone, and so was that certainty. Charles moved closer, but she refused to look at him. He tried to explain that the crown had reached a point where personal love could no longer guide public duty. The monarch's words offered logic, not comfort. Camilla answered that every sacrifice she had made now felt rewritten as a mistake. He denied that, yet his decision had already made the argument impossible to win. William later received a documented copy of the original announcement from a senior household official. Several deleted lines had described Catherine's appointment as temporary, but his father had personally struck them out. The removal proved that the transfer was not an emergency pause. Charles wanted the new order understood as permanent. Catherine then read a private household memorandum assessing her through 3 tests: public confidence, ceremonial discipline, and the ability to stabilize the succession during a royal emergency. The succession, the formal order deciding who inherits the throne, was not changing, but the palace feared a deeper crisis around it. She looked at William and asked what emergency could justify destroying one woman's position to secure another's. His answer came slowly. It led back to one disastrous ceremony, one private act of defiance, and the moment concerned became an irreversible decision. Their emotions explained the pain, but the true cause remained hidden inside a single palace event that everyone present would later remember as the point of no return. The collapse did not begin with the public announcement. It began 3 weeks earlier, during a private rehearsal for a major Commonwealth reception. What should have been a routine ceremonial preparation became the moment senior royals realized that Camilla and the future of the monarchy were moving in opposite directions. One conversation, overheard outside a closed reception room, would force Charles to choose between loyalty to his wife and survival of the institution. Tension entered Buckingham Palace before anyone spoke openly. The closed rehearsal brought Camilla, Catherine, William, Charles, and selected senior courtiers together to prepare for a major Commonwealth diplomatic reception. The Commonwealth is a voluntary association of nations, many with historic links to Britain, and royal receptions involving its representatives carry deep symbolic weight. Every greeting, speaking position, and order of entry was meant to show that the present reign and the next generation remained united. Camilla studied the final arrangement and immediately saw Catherine placed at the center of the greeting line for younger Commonwealth representatives. She pushed the seating card away and said no future queen should be presented as though the current one had already disappeared. The Queen Consort's words cut through the room because they transformed a ceremonial detail into a personal warning. She was not only challenging a placement, she was challenging the direction of the monarchy itself. Catherine felt the tension harden and quietly offered to step back. She knew the reception mattered, because younger nations were watching for signs of continuity, not family rivalry. William refused. The prince told her that surrendering her place would not create peace. It would reward humiliation. His controlled defense changed the mood instantly. Camilla looked at him as though he had crossed an invisible line, while he made it clear that his wife would no longer be diminished to protect someone else's pride. Charles ended the rehearsal before the argument could deepen, but the real betrayal came moments later. A senior courtier recorded in a documented account that Camilla stopped an aide outside the reception room and ordered the final program revised without the king's approval. She instructed that Catherine be moved behind 2 less senior family members, a decision designed to weaken her standing before foreign guests. Suspicion became certainty when Charles received the altered program that afternoon. He demanded a review, and the documented file revealed a pattern. Catherine's briefings had been delayed, her ceremonial access restricted, and several independent engagements quietly blocked. Camilla's intervention was no isolated act. It was a campaign of resistance, built piece by piece behind palace doors. That evening, the monarch summoned both women to the same private chamber. He refused separate explanations, removed every advisor, and placed the altered program between them. Catherine understood that restraint would no longer protect her. Camilla realized the evidence had reached her husband, and Charles knew the choice waiting inside that room could destroy either his marriage or the future stability of the crown. The hidden struggle had finally reached the king's door, and when the three of them entered that room, there would be no staff, no ceremony, and nowhere left for the truth to hide. Charles did not raise his voice at first. He placed the altered program on the table and asked one question: "Did you order this?" Camilla looked at Catherine, then back at her husband, and the silence became an admission before a single answer was spoken. What followed was not a ceremonial disagreement. It was a battle over legitimacy, jealousy, and which woman the monarchy believed could carry its future. Charles pressed his hand against the file and explained why the act could not be dismissed as a household quarrel. Sovereign approval means the monarch's formal permission, and without it, no one has the right to alter the structure of an official royal event. Changing the program created confusion over who spoke for the crown, and suggested that private resentment could overrule the king's authority. For the institution, that was dangerous. For him, it was deeply personal. Camilla finally answered. She admitted that watching Catherine receive effortless warmth had reopened years of bitterness she thought she had buried. The Queen Consort said the younger woman had been allowed to appear graceful, loyal, and almost untouchable, while she herself had spent decades judged through old wounds. She accused Catherine of benefiting from an image of perfection that no one had ever permitted her to possess. Catherine stayed calm, but her restraint carried more force than anger. She told Camilla that she had never asked to become a symbol in someone else's struggle. The princess explained that the repeated exclusions had done more than embarrass her at ceremonies. They had reached her children, who had begun asking why their mother was moved, overlooked, or treated as though she did not belong inside her own family. That confession changed the room. Charles opened the second file. A documented internal review showed repeated interference with Catherine's engagements, delayed briefing access, and deliberate attempts to move her away from central positions in major ceremonial photographs. The review, a formal palace investigation into staff decisions and royal instructions, made one thing clear. The altered program was part of a pattern, not a single emotional mistake. Camilla stared at the pages and understood the truth before her husband said it aloud. This meeting was not being held to decide whether she had acted improperly. The evidence had already convinced him. The only question left was how severe the punishment would be. She asked whether he had brought Catherine there to witness her fall. He answered that he had brought them together because private divisions had now become a threat to public stability. Charles closed the file and said he would consult the small circle capable of turning his personal decision into an organized palace transition. But his next words changed everything. Someone inside that circle had already prepared the structure for Catherine's elevation, complete with revised duties, security instructions, and ceremonial authority. The confrontation had broken the family's fragile peace, yet the final outcome would be shaped not by emotion alone, but by the quiet figures who controlled the machinery behind the throne. Royal power rarely moves through dramatic speeches. It moves through schedules, seals, briefings, and private recommendations placed before the sovereign at exactly the right moment. While the family struggled with betrayal, a small circle of advisors had already concluded that Catherine represented the monarchy's safest path forward. Their recommendation would not crown her, but it would give Charles the structure he needed to make an unthinkable decision appear immediate and inevitable. Charles entered the briefing, knowing emotion could no longer control the outcome. Around him sat the Lord Chamberlain, private secretaries, legal advisors, and senior household officials. each carrying part of the crown's hidden machinery. The Lord Chamberlain is the senior official responsible for organizing major royal ceremonies and household operations. Their task was precise: transfer ceremonial responsibilities without changing the constitutional succession or Catherine's legal position as William's wife. William listened as the advisors drew a hard line between constitutional authority and palace designation. The Queen Consort does not rule independently or inherit the sovereign's legal powers. Yet the monarch decides who represents the crown beside him at ceremonies, diplomatic receptions, and state occasions. That distinction gave Charles room to act, but it also made the decision feel colder. Camilla could remain his wife while losing the public role that had defined her place beside him. A veteran courtier reached for the recommendation, then stopped. According to a documented account prepared after the meeting, he had spent years helping Camilla gain acceptance inside the household. He had defended her appointments, protected her ceremonial position, and guided staff through years of public hostility. Now his signature would help dismantle the very place he had once worked to secure. His hand shook before the pen finally touched the page. William refused to treat that signature as victory. He told the room that Catherine must never be presented as the woman who triumphed over another's destruction. The prince warned that such an image would burden her service before it began, and turn every future appearance into a comparison built on humiliation. The future king wanted stability, but not revenge. His words forced the advisors to soften the language surrounding the transition. Then the evidence arrived. Polling summaries, private correspondence, and Commonwealth feedback showed a widening confidence gap. Catherine was repeatedly described as calm, disciplined, and capable of uniting generations. Camilla's recent interventions, however, had created fear of internal rivalry at the highest level. Charles opened a prepared document marked Continuity Crown. The coded plan contained revised duties, public language, security arrangements, and a schedule placing Catherine beside him at the next major state engagement. He signed the final page, then added one condition in his own hand. Camilla must hear the decision directly from him, before anyone removed a single privilege. The machinery of power had spoken with cold precision, but its first consequence would unfold in a silent private room, where Camilla would be forced to watch her old life disappear line by line. The palace announcement lasted less than a minute. Its consequences began immediately. Before the evening was over, staff changed seating plans, security instructions, official correspondence, and the order of the next state reception. Yet the most painful moment happened away from the public. Camilla sat before a folder containing the duties she would no longer perform, while Charles stood across from her knowing that every page represented a promise he had chosen to break. The household moved with brutal speed. Catherine received expanded briefing access, revised precedents at official events, and responsibility for ceremonies once assigned to the Queen Consort. Precedence is the formal ranking that decides where each royal stands, enters, and is seated during official occasions. Changing it mattered, because it made the transfer visible before a single speech was given. Staff would now turn to the younger woman first, while the former consort remained behind. Camilla opened the revised schedule as Charles waited in silence. Several engagements had been crossed out, including receptions, charity appearances, and ceremonial meetings she had expected to lead. She would remain his wife and keep her private place within the family, but the public role beside the sovereign was disappearing line by line. The loss was not symbolic. It removed the duties through which she had spent years proving she belonged. Charles watched her reach the final page. She placed the folder on the table and asked whether the country would now remember her only as the woman removed from beside him. The king tried to answer, but every defense sounded empty. He had protected the monarchy, yet the cost was sitting directly in front of him. Camilla stepped back when he reached toward her. She told him that affection without loyalty felt like another form of abandonment. The words struck harder because they came without anger. The monarch could not comfort her without weakening the decision, and he could not defend the decision without deepening her humiliation. The schedule held one final blow. Catherine would accompany Charles to a diplomatic reception within 48 hours. That speed proved the transition was designed not only to discipline Camilla, but to show immediate stability to foreign representatives and the public. The crown wanted no pause, no confusion, and no space for resistance. A member of staff arrived to collect the ceremonial dispatch box. The box, used to carry official papers and confidential royal documents, represented access to the daily work of the crown. He hesitated at the doorway, but Camilla lifted it herself and placed it into his hands. One quiet gesture surrendered the authority she had spent years building. Catherine received confirmation of the reception shortly afterward, yet she did not celebrate. She asked Charles for a private conversation without William, advisors, or palace officials. Before accepting the role publicly, she needed to hear whether he was choosing her to serve the monarchy or using her to punish his wife. Camilla had lost the symbols of her authority, but Catherine was about to discover that receiving them carried a burden far heavier than anyone outside the palace understood. Catherine entered the room alone. No private secretary followed her, no legal advisor waited outside, and William had agreed not to intervene. Across from her sat Charles, visibly exhausted by the decision he had made. She did not thank him for the elevation. She did not ask about jewels, precedence, or ceremony. Instead, she told the king that she would accept only if the new role served the monarchy, rather than becoming punishment disguised as duty. Catherine understood exactly what the position would demand. The consort role meant standing beside the reigning sovereign as a symbol of support and continuity, even though William remained heir and Charles still carried the constitutional duties of kingship. Her elevation did not alter the succession. It changed the public face of the crown, and that mattered, because every future appearance would be measured against Camilla's removal. Charles listened as she explained the danger. If the transition looked like revenge, the monarchy would turn a private wound into a permanent public spectacle. The princess knew sympathy could quickly become suspicion. One smile might be called triumph. One confident speech might be treated as proof that she had wanted the role all along. Compassion, she insisted, was no longer a private virtue. It had become a political necessity. Catherine then asked the question he had been avoiding. Had he chosen her because he trusted her, or because he needed someone the public would accept after losing confidence in his wife? The king lowered his eyes before answering. According to a recorded private account of the conversation, he admitted that both reasons had shaped the decision. Charles did not hide behind ceremony. He told her that the country trusted her, but that trust alone was not enough. Her greatest strength was the refusal to exploit another person's weakness. The monarch said that even after being pushed aside, she had never demanded Camilla's humiliation. That restraint, more than popularity or rank, convinced him she could protect the crown without allowing power to harden her. Catherine set one condition: Camilla must keep her dignity, private security, and a respected place at family occasions. She would not begin her service by helping erase the woman she replaced. Success built on total destruction, she warned, would poison every duty that followed. Charles agreed, and revealed that his final written instruction already blocked hostile briefings against his wife. A hostile briefing is the deliberate leaking of damaging information to shape public opinion. The removal would remain permanent, but the palace would not organize a campaign to destroy her name. Catherine signed the acceptance page. Her hand did not shake, but the silence after the pen lifted carried the weight of everything ahead. Within hours, she would stand beside Charles before the country, and that first appearance would decide whether the change looked like a palace coup, a royal tragedy, or the beginning of stability. The private agreement gave the transition a moral center, But outside the palace gates, millions were already deciding what Catherine's elevation meant, and whose side history would take. By sunrise, the story no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to television studios, newspaper presses, crowded pavements, and millions of people staring at the same extraordinary words. Yet one public moment came to define the entire upheaval. Outside Buckingham Palace, a young girl lifted a handmade sign reading, "Be kind, be strong, be queen," just as Catherine's car passed through the gates for her first official appearance. Catherine saw the crowd and briefly lowered her eyes. The affection was overwhelming, but so was the expectation. Before she had performed a single duty in the new role, people were already treating her as the face of a royal future they wanted to believe in. That mattered, because public trust had become part of the palace's answer to the crisis, and one wrong gesture could turn sympathy into suspicion. Broadcasters interrupted regular programs to explain that the Queen Consort's ceremonial duties had been reassigned immediately. The consort role is the public position held beside the reigning sovereign, carrying representation and ceremony, but no independent ruling power. Palace officials quickly issued a second statement, confirming that Charles remained monarch, and William remained first in line to the throne. The crown wanted no confusion about succession, only certainty about who would now stand beside the king. Camilla watched the same arrival from a private residence. A documented household account later described how she remained silent, as commentators called it, the beginning of the Catherine era. The Queen Consort listened until one presenter praised the speed of the transition, then switched off the television. The untouched morning papers beside her carried the same message in harsher words. One front page captured the national mood with brutal simplicity. Beneath a photograph of Catherine entering Buckingham Palace, the headline declared, "The crown chooses its future." A smaller image showed Camilla leaving an engagement alone the previous evening. Success and suffering had been placed side by side, turning a family wound into a national symbol. Charles felt the weight of that image before the diplomatic reception began. He paused outside the hall and offered Catherine his arm. She hesitated, understanding that the gesture would become more powerful than any statement. Then she accepted. The king moved forward beside her, and the new partnership became real before diplomats, courtiers, and cameras. William watched from nearby without celebration. The prince knew the reception's success would calm fears around the monarchy, but he also understood the private cost behind every polished moment. Catherine carried public hope. Camilla carried public loss. Charles carried both. The reception passed without protest. The crowds remained calm, and the institution appeared steadier. Yet survival was not the same as healing. The final meaning of the upheaval would depend on whether all four could turn pain into service, rather than allowing victory to harden into resentment. The world had witnessed the transfer of royal authority, but only the final choices of Catherine, Charles, William, and Camilla could determine whether the crown emerged healed or merely victorious. In the end, there was no true winner. Catherine gained a crown-shaped responsibility years before she expected it. Camilla lost the public role that had justified decades of endurance. Charles preserved the monarchy by damaging his marriage, while William watched his wife become the answer to a crisis she never created. Yet from that painful exchange came a clear verdict. The crown would survive only by placing service above possession. Catherine formally accepted the public responsibilities of Queen Consort and stood beside Charles at state ceremonies, diplomatic receptions, and national occasions. The title placed her beside the reigning monarch as a symbol of support and continuity, while William remained heir and prepared with her for their own future reign. Her rise brought stability, but it also carried the memory of the woman she had replaced. Camilla withdrew from central ceremonial life without leaving the king's private world. Revised schedules, precedents, and official representation made her removal permanent. Precedence is the formal order, deciding where royals stand, enter, and sit at public events. Losing it meant losing visible authority. Even if her marriage remained, she was still beside Charles in private, but no longer beside the crown in public. Camilla sent Catherine a handwritten message before the younger woman's first full state banquet. Do not let the title take more from you than it gives. According to a documented household account, the new consort read the sentence twice and placed it inside her private diary. She did not show the note to staff. She understood it was not surrender. It was a warning from someone who had learned the cost of royal survival. Charles later visited his wife without advisors or documents. He did not ask forgiveness for protecting the institution because he knew the decision would remain. Instead, the king admitted that duty had separated them with a cruelty no public statement could explain. Camilla accepted his honesty, but she did not pretend the wound had closed. Their marriage survived, changed and scarred. Catherine then made one final choice. She retained one of Camilla's charitable initiatives rather than clearing away every trace of her predecessor. The decision proved that authority did not require revenge. Replacement did not have to become erasure. William told his wife that the monarchy had changed when she placed compassion above triumph. The prince said her greatest qualification was not popularity, beauty, or rank. It was the discipline to protect the dignity of someone who had tried to diminish her. The verdict was complete. Catherine's elevation ended Camilla's public reign and began a new royal era built on stability, restraint, and generational change. The crown survived its internal struggle, but exposed its permanent price. Those who serve it must sometimes surrender love, pride, and personal justice so the institution can endure. Catherine walked forward carrying the duties of a queen. Camilla stepped back with the scars of one, and the monarchy survived because both women finally accepted that the crown belonged to neither of them. It belonged to the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.